focus on the ultimate goal. Like I always say to the team repeatedly over years of growth, that we will tack along the way, but the point on the horizon, what we're attempting to accomplish remains the same, right? So that people are able to focus on the end point as we, as I use the sailing analogy, that you may have to tack along the way to get to that end point. But as long as we maintain clear communication, clear focus, reinforcement of what we are attempting to do, and ensuring that everybody sees consistency in that message and that goal, then that allows everybody an operating environment in which they can stay focused.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Jon Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow? We all know that focus is a very important aspect of getting work done in the immediate moment, right? Sitting down at your desk, focusing on the spreadsheet in front of you or any other task that you have to get done. You want to increase that level of focus. But what about at a company level? How do you get focus and alignment and consistency from a team of 50 people? Well, that's exactly the topic today, the power of focus to drive growth with Jon Elwell. He's the CEO of Kno2. They're a healthcare IT provider. They're focused on the healthcare market. The irony of this, we talk about focus and leadership and culture and what really takes for you to create the kind of focus that you need to drive a company forward with a small team that has big goals. All unpacked in today's episode. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, how do you become a better leader? Do you want to be a better leader? Do you feel like leadership would make a difference in your company? At some point in time, your focus goes away from like the immediate projects and even revenue to how do I lead? How do I align people? How do I increase focus? How do I develop the people around me, whether my executive team or the middle managers and people in the front lines? How do we get tribal knowledge to flow throughout the organization? All these challenges happen with better leadership. And if you want to be a powerful leader, I want to figure out what's getting in your way. Now, I say that because it really is. There's always something you've got to let go of. You've got to shift from one level to the next. What is that? How do you put words to it? This has been the core focus of what I do with leaders for the last decade. I want to help founders, CEOs, and their teams be better leaders, be more powerful leaders, and create a sense of ownership. If you want to have a chat with me about what's going on in your business, just go to jonhammett.com, schedule your call. We can talk about what's really going on, get to the heart of it. I promise not to sell you anything. This is 100% my way of giving to you because you're an audience member here. Now, I make myself available to one or two of these every week just so I can connect with my audience and really tune in to what's going on. I'd love to help you. We'll help you develop a plan. We'll help you really zero in on how to move forward and all that. Absolutely no cost. Just go to jonhammett.com and schedule your call. Now let's jump into the interview with Jon. Hey, Jon, how are you?
Great. How are you, Jon?
Fantastic. Happy to have you here on the podcast. I'd love to get started with you telling us a little bit about the company. So what is and who is Kno2?
So Kno2 is 100% healthcare IT. We don't dabble in any other industry than healthcare, completely focused in that area. And as I like to say, single threaded, meaning we have one focus and one focus only, which is this term called interoperability, which in healthcare has been a buzzword for some time, which at the end of the day, for all of us that experience healthcare and go to our doctors and hospitals and labs, there's always this computer they're typing into, and it's called an electronic health record they're entering your information into. And the unfortunate event today in U.S. healthcare is those computer systems from provider to provider don't talk well to one another. So as we all know, we walk into a doctor's office and they tend to ask us the same questions I was just asked a month ago. And you're like, how do you not know that already in this day and age where transparency seems to be very easy? So we're focused on the topic of interoperability. We saw a massive gap in the industry several years ago and dedicated ourselves to filling that gap with cloud-based technology to address a problem that hadn't been meaningfully solved. So that's who Kno2 is, and that's what we're focused to.
There's been a lot of changes in healthcare over the last couple of years with, doctors not even having to show up or you going to their offices. What do you see the biggest shift in the next maybe 3 to 5 years as it relates to healthcare technology?
I think that healthcare technology shift, I think is an evolution of the technology that they already own. One of the interesting things about the healthcare industry is that change doesn't happen fast, meaning providers like the art of what they do. They don't want to sit in front of a computer. They don't want to use technology. They want to use the knowledge and all the training that they've gone through to be the capable doctors and providers that they are today. So technology actually evolves very slowly in healthcare because the adoption of it is not recognized as something of need, meaning it's a blessing and a curse for the healthcare community because it balances out the science and the art of providing healthcare, right? Most of providers go through their entire training, residency, whatever type of caregiver they are, and they're not spending time on the technology that they're going to use. That's how they're going to care for a patient. So we don't see radical change, but we do see evolution of the tools that they're using, and those continuing, hopefully, to adopt in a way that they need them, and not being through some government regulation or some government statement, but really around what providers need to be most effective in front of the patient at the point of care. And for that to be effective, it has to be evolutionary, not revolutionary. They don't have time to take 6 months off and figure out all this new technology that they were just handed. So being able to bring technology to this space in a way that feels comfortable but effective and to create change without them having to feel like they changed, I think is going to be and has been for some time the needed focus to bring technology into the healthcare space.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Jon. One of the reasons why we want to have you on the podcast is because you've got some interesting perspectives on what does it take to create fast growth companies. And I say interesting, that like if someone said it takes focus, they'd say, well, of course it does. But you take it to the next level. So tell us a little bit about the consistency and focus that you think really drives your company forward.
I think it's the focus on the ultimate goal. Like I always say to the team repeatedly over years of growth, that we will tack along the way, but the point on the horizon, what we're attempting to accomplish remains the same, right? So that people are able to focus on the end point as we, as I use the sailing analogy, that you may have to tack along the way to get to that end point. But as long as we maintain clear communication, clear focus, reinforcement of what we are attempting to do, and ensuring that everybody sees consistency in that message and that goal, then that allows everybody an operating environment in which they can stay focused. And further challenging in this environment because the number of inputs, between what's happening on their phone and the chat that's popping up on their screen and just across the board, focus is very difficult in the current environment for anyone in any industry, personal or professional. But at the end of the day, I think consistency and continuing to focus on the goal, and that goal not changing, is critically important, because then everybody knows what they're operating towards, right? So that they don't get confused and they can stay focused on what they're trying to accomplish.
I'm just curious here, and I have no idea what your answer will be, so I'm taking a little bit of a stab. Do you guys have company core values that kind of help you guys align around this focus?
Yeah, it's probably a term you've heard before. I'd call them BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals, and those have been actually established before my arrival. When it was a very small company, they had very audacious goals back even when there was a 4-person company. And as people come into the organization, they're introduced to the BHAGs. As we communicate, we do weekly employee calls in a virtual environment, much like this one. There's continuous reflection on that. So that's kind of the guiding principles of the company, so that we maintain that focus.
I'm kind of curious, what would we see across your meetings or across the way you guys share information, whether it be scorecards and metrics that allow you guys to stay focused on these goals?
So absolutely, each department has their goals and their metrics that are shared. We're also very transparent, also even with our financial results, meaning as I expressed to the company, everybody's a contributor to the entire P&L, right? And at the end of the day, I've never understood why that's held, at a very high level, and not let people experience and understand the impact that they're having on the organization. And by the way, there's times when it's not great, and then there's times when it's amazing. But the willingness to share constantly and be transparent on that, I think is critically important, because at the end of the day, it's probably the easiest scoreboard, as each department has their individual goals, metrics that they're trying to achieve and are measured by. At the end of the day, that sum total of that represents what we're trying to achieve in the marketplace. And the sharing of that, I think, brings a lot of comfort to the company, a lot of trust. The employees feel a lot of trust in them, that we're willing to expose and be as transparent as we are. And I think that it really feeds our culture.
Hold on for a second. Jon's been talking about transparency. He mentioned examples of financial transparency, but you also have to look at the other aspect of transparency. Are your people willing to share what's really going on? when the recorder wasn't on, Jon shared with me a question that he asked that's really powerful. What is it that's going on in this business that isn't the way you expected? And he asked this of people that have just joined the team. He wanted them to share the bad stuff, and he invited them to really talk about where we can improve. Are you having that kind of transparent conversations inside your leadership? I hope you are, because transparency in financials is great. Transparency in conversations is even more powerful. Back to Jon. You said something in there that reminded me of a conversation I had just a couple hours earlier with a new prospect, and we're talking about transparency, and they said, yeah, not really open to everything in the financials, especially if it's bad news. You mentioned about, well, not every financial report's going to have the best stellar news. What happens when your team hears it's a little bit off, or it's not as good as it could be?
I think because of the trust, the word I think is a really important word, and sometimes overused or sometimes misapplied, meaning you think you have trust and you don't. But I think when you have trust, it's almost a rallying cry, right? Meaning when things aren't going exactly as planned and you expose it and you've been consistent, back to my point earlier. My experience here at Kno2 with the employees we brought in, it creates a rallying cry like, well, that's not happening again. What do we have to do to change that? What contributions can I make? What are we doing wrong that didn't allow that to happen? It actually becomes a very positive reinforcement. It's not a tool I want to use all the time. I prefer it to be positive all the time. But when you're consistent and you're in a trusting environment, it really rallies the team, and they come around and say, hey, let's affect this in a positive way so we don't have that news again.
I'm kind of curious, Jon. I know all of leadership involves us taking risk and taking challenges. What mistakes have you made that you can share with us that we might learn from today?
Are we going to extend this to like 3 or 4 hours?
Take the top one that comes to mind.
So I think that in any company that starts, and we literally started from scratch. I mean, this company was started with a drawing and a notepad, right? So there was no pricing. We hadn't even named the company yet. There's no pricing. There's no contracts, marketing. What is the company's slogan? None of that existed. And so you can imagine as you go through that evolution, there's many, many mistakes that are made. I think for this particular discussion and to kind of make it finite in the time we have together, from a CEO's perspective in a SaaS company, and for those of people that understand that, a reoccurring business where you're not pulling revenues up front, how you deploy your resource and the decisions you make are so precise. Meaning, if you resource the company incorrectly because you believe things are going a certain direction, there's not a lot of latitude. So resourcing the company, there's been mistakes along the way as we decided on whether it be the structure of the organization, where we were investing our resources, what we thought would have the best return, and you don't have as much wiggle room when you're operating in a SaaS model. And for those of you that are listening to podcasts that are in that model, I'm sure they're smiling right now saying, Jon, I know exactly what you mean. So the mistakes there, I would say I reflect on quite often, right? As I look back over time and say, boy, if I had those 8 years back now, starting back in 2014, decisions I would have made differently. But it came around giving my people the best chance to be successful, right? Because at the end of the day, the resources that are brought into the organization, where we make investments, when we make those investments, are really to empower the employees and give them the capability to perform what we need to accomplish. So if I were to focus in one area that for this discussion, I'd say that there's many times where we pivoted, thus a mistake, pivoted and said, we got that one wrong, and had to come back and make adjustments. Luckily, we've been successful in doing that. But if I get to do it all again, it would be much smoother. That's for sure.
Well, hindsight's always 20/20, as they say, and this is a good example of that. You said empowering your employees. What have you learned over your years of being the CEO of this fast growth company about what real empowerment is and what it looks like?
I think it starts from the day that we engage a prospect to come in the company or recruit. When we talk to anybody that we're interested in, they're interested in coming to the organization, one of the things that I discuss with them is the importance of their fingerprints being on the company. Meaning we have a strong desire. Our leadership team's ego is not tied to the number of employees we have, meaning we're trying to put systems and processes in place to be as efficient as possible and don't have a view to become very large from an employee count. And so part of the reward in that is that the individuals we bring in can truly see their contribution. And we establish that day one as we start to recruit an individual and implore with them how important it is to us that they can see their fingerprints, their outcomes to the success, and point back and tell their family, or tell whoever they want to speak to at a dinner party, I contributed to that and I can show you exactly where. Number one. Number two, the other thing that I say, and to anyone coming in the organization, is that org charts are for external purposes only, meaning the external world needs to understand where to go and how to navigate this company. If you're interested, if you have an issue, you want to talk to an executive, you want to talk to sales, marketing, whatever that may be, an org chart and titles are important. But inside the company, I established very early on that if I ever hear that somebody said, well, Jon, I had to talk to my manager before I talked to you, this is not going to work inside the Kno2 culture, right? So to one, give them confidence that we want them to be rock stars, not make the leadership team look like rock stars. And two, that we're not a hierarchy-driven organization. It's critically important externally, but that behavior can't exist internally for the culture we're trying to build here at Kno2.
Give us an example of that, because I want to make sure it's clear for our audience about, I had to talk to my manager before I talked to you about this.
Yeah, so there can be, when you're fast growing, as you mentioned earlier, as we've been, you're experiencing things daily, weekly, things are happening, customer feedback, an issue that's arising. There may be a challenge. In our world, it's highly technical, and there may be an issue on the network or an issue with Exchange. And what you don't want is, okay, well, I've got to keep, I'm not sure I want Jon to know about that yet. So, and my manager's on vacation, they're coming back tomorrow. So I'll talk to my manager, and then my manager can take it to Jon and have that discussion. And the manager will be upset because if they know something went wrong and they didn't have control, it makes them look bad. All of that has to be eliminated in this organization. I always say we debate the topics, not the people, right? So this isn't ever personal. This is just about the issue at hand that needs to be handled. And we're not judging the individual as we're solving the problem. So to allow for the company to be as agile as we are, and as move as quickly as we are, I'll come back to the word, you have to have that trust in the organization that I'm willing to, if need be, say, hey, Jon, I just got you on the phone just so you know, this is what's going on. You got any advice? Because I can't get a hold of Matt. I can't get a hold of Jill, right? At the end of the day, we need that permutation, I think, for the individual, so they feel valued, as well as our ability to move quickly.
Jon's just been talking about, we don't want hierarchy inside of our conversations. We don't want to make sure that you're going to your manager before you tell us what's wrong. Now, this is a place where I think a lot of people need to be understood and have the confidence and the courage to lead up. And lead up is not just one level. Maybe it's 2 or 3 levels. It's being able to have conversations with people above you of where people are out of alignment or something's wrong. And having the courage to do that really comes from you creating a place where people feel safe. And when you have that inside your culture, they're willing to share with you the things that might be bad news, or it might be something that you need to know that you don't know. They're not hiding it. You want to make sure you're having that kind of safety inside your culture, because it really is important. Back to Jon. I appreciate the detail there, because that makes it much more clear about what you mean about the hierarchy of the business. I'm kind of curious, Jon, we've been talking about focus and consistency, and that's really a big part of what you think makes the company successful. What have we left out that you think is important?
Give me better context when you say left out against what backs.
What else have we not talked about that you feel like plays a critical role in the success of your company?
I think they both contributed to, and you've heard me use the word multiple times, but it's culture, right? A true culture. It's mentioned, it's talked about, as you mentioned earlier, books are written on it, and you can read those books and okay, but what does it take to create a real culture? And that, I would say, is an area of focus that has, when you create the culture you're looking for, the true culture you want, and I'm assuming that it's a healthy one, it's incredibly powerful. When you're growing a company from scratch, when you grow as fast as we are, as everybody that's listening to this calls companies are growing fast, there's a lot of growing pain. And as you're doing that, having that culture that can persist through those difficult times as you're growing. I just had a conversation with one of our groups earlier today, and we're growing so fast, and we're growing faster than the systems are allowing them to get through the throughput. And letting them know that we understand and we trust what they're doing and that we're addressing it. While at the same time, guys, I need you to keep doing what you're doing in the meantime, right? Because we just can't get those systems in as fast as we can. And the culture is consistent enough that they know that's genuine, right? I'm not just blowing smoke. I'm not just, hey, rah, 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 I just read this book, I better get you on the phone. It's that consistency in the culture that I think a lot of the things we're talking about adds up into that big word, is really something that I think is a really important foundation. as you're looking to grow a company very quickly.
I certainly agree with all that, Jon. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your wisdom on the podcast.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it.
Here's the part where I get to reflect on what Jon has just shared with us, just to help you understand how you can take it as a leader. When he talks about focus, this isn't just about your strategy. This is about focusing on the systems that you're building and the right people for the job. He also talked about empowering people. And if you ever feel like you need to let go, then one of the critical aspects of that is empowering those around you, because you've got to let go to someone that you trust. And that's a part of your job as a leadership and building the right culture. I just don't know what's more important than that, because that's what really drives strategy. That's what drives the customer experience. That's what drives the financial results, is having the right people aligned together in this healthy culture that Jon's been describing. So if you're curious about what your steps are to be a more powerful leader, to create more of alignment and ownership across projects, I invite you to reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you about what's going on in your business, get to know you. Just go to JonHammett.com and schedule your call today. Absolutely free. Promise not to sell you anything. It really is just about connecting with you and helping you be the best leader you can be. When you think about growth and you think about leadership, think about Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.